Okay, let's dive right into a really fascinating and pretty intense chapter from the Bible today, Exodus chapter 33. So right at the start, we're dropped into the aftermath of, well, a major crisis. God tells the Israelites basically, okay, time to leave Mount Horeb, head to that land I promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
That land, flowing with milk and honey.
Exactly. And he even says, I'll send an angel ahead of you, and this angel will drive out all the inhabitants, the Canaanites, Amorites, Hittites, all of them. So it sounds like the plan's moving forward.
It sounds like it, but then comes this stunning condition. Right after promising the destination and the help to clear it, God says, but I will not go with you.
Wow. Just like that. They get the land, the angelic help, but not God himself. Why the withdrawal?
Well, the reason he gives is blunt. It points right back to their recent behavior. He says, he won't go because you are a stiff-necked people.
Stiff-necked.
Yeah.
That phrase again.
Yes. And he adds, and I might destroy you on the way. It really highlights how serious their sin was and, the danger his sheer holiness poses to them in their current state. His presence isn't just comfort, it's also potentially consuming fire if they're not right with him.
Okay, that's heavy. How did the people even react when they heard these distressing words?
The text is clear. They heard it, and they immediately started to mourn, like deep grief.
And they did something visible too, right?
They did. Following God's instruction, apparently given through Moses, they took off their ornaments right there at Mount Horeb.
Ornaments, so like jewelry and stuff. Why that specifically?
Yeah, things that might symbolize, status, celebration, maybe even their identity or wealth. Taking them off is this powerful, visible act of humiliation. It's like stripping away the outward signs of joy and normalcy because they've heard God is withdrawing his presence. It's serious mourning.
So they're grieving, they've humbled themselves visibly, and they're facing this prospect of the promised land, but without God actually with them. It feels incredibly tense.
It really is. And right in that moment, the focus kind of zooms in on Moses and his, unique relationship with God.
Talk about that. What happens next?
This is where Moses does something interesting. The text mentions his practice setting up a tent, called the tent of meeting, but pitching it way outside the main camp.
Outside, not in the camp.
Right. Some distance away. This isn't the main tabernacle that comes later, the one that sits right in the middle of everyone. This tent is separate.
What's the significance of putting it outside?
Well, it could really symbolize that separation we were just talking about. A holy God and a people described as stiff-necked. God's meeting place is physically distanced from the main community, highlighting that access isn't general right now, it's mediated.
And the people could see this happening.
Oh, yeah. The text says they'd stand at their own tent doors and watch Moses go out to this special tent. They'd watch until he went inside.
And then?
And then, as Moses entered, that pillar of cloud, the visible sign of God's presence that guided them, it would come down and stand right at the entrance of that tent.
Wow. So the presence is there, but at the entrance with Moses.
Exactly. And it was there, at the entrance, that the Lord would speak with Moses.
And the description of how they spoke, it's just incredible. It says, face to face as a man speaks with his friend.
That phrase is so powerful, isn't it? It really sets this interaction apart.
How so? Compared to, other ways God communicated.
Well, think about it. Prophets often got visions, dreams, maybe heard a voice. Others encountered angels. But face-to-face, as a friend, that suggests a kind of directness, a mutuality, an intimacy that's almost unparalleled. It implies a level of understanding and access that really marks Moses as unique, even among giants of faith.
Like a genuine conversation, not just receiving instructions.
Precisely, a deep personal connection. And interestingly, after these talks, Moses would go back to the camp.
But someone stayed behind.
Yes, his young assistant, Joshua. Joshua would remain in the tent, maybe keeping watch, maybe maintaining that point of contact. It just further underlines how special this tent and this access was.
Okay, so Moses has this extraordinary access, this unique relationship. And the nation is grieving, facing this journey without God's presence. What does Moses do?
He steps right into that gap. He goes to the Lord, basically laying out the problem. He says, you've been telling me lead these people, but you haven't really made it clear who exactly you're sending with me.
He's asking for clarity, for backup.
He is. And then he immediately but leverages his standing with God. He reminds God, you yourself said, I know you by name and you have found favor with me.
He's basically saying, We have this special relationship. You initiated, you know me, you favor me.
Mm-hmm.
So based on that, how is this supposed to work without you?
Exactly. He's connecting God's personal relationship with him directly to the task of leading the entire nation. It's a bold move.
And he keeps pushing, right? He says something like, if I've found favor, teach me your ways so I can know you better, so I can keep finding favor.
Yes, deepening the personal connection. But then he immediately pivots back to the people. He adds, remember that this nation is your people. He refuses to let it just be about him.
He's pulling the nation back into that favored space through his own relationship.
He's trying to, and God's initial response seems to focus on Moses personally. The Lord says, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest.
Okay, so that's assurance for Moses himself, his leader. But Moses isn't done, is he? This is where it gets really audacious.
Not at all. This is the crux. Moses hears God say, I'll be with you, and he replies, essentially, that's not enough. He says, if your presence does not go with us, meaning everyone, the whole community, do not send us up from here.
Whoa. He's drawing a line in the sand. He's saying, we're not moving, not one step, unless you come with all of us.
It's an absolute refusal to proceed under the original conditions, and he explains why. He asks God, how will anyone even know that you're pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us?
He's focused on the witness, the outward sign. Without God's presence, they're just another group of people wandering in the desert.
Precisely. He argues it's the only thing that gives them meaning, that makes them distinct. And then he hits the core question. What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth?
That is such a radical claim. Not the law yet, not the land they're going to, not their ancestry alone, but God's accompanying presence. That's the sole differentiator.
That's Moses' argument. Their identity isn't inherent in who they are, but in whose they are, demonstrated by that active, visible, felt presence among them. It's a relational identity, totally dependent on God choosing to be with them.
So how does God respond to this?
Yeah.
This incredibly bold stand, this insistence on presence for everyone.
The Lord relents. He says to Moses, I will do the very thing you have asked.
He agrees to go with the whole nation.
Yes. But listen to the reason he gives. Because I am pleased with you, and I know you by name. It comes back to Moses. His personal standing, his favor, becomes the very channel through which God's presence is restored to the entire nation.
That's incredible. So Moses secures God's presence for the journey, but he's still not done.
Nope. Right after getting this monumental yes for the people, Moses makes another astonishing request. He says, now show me your glory.
He wants more. After getting God to agree to come along, he asks to see his glory.
Yeah, it's like securing the presence wasn't just about safe passage. It fueled a desire for deeper intimacy, for a more profound revelation of who God is.
And God's response to that.
It's fascinating. It's both a yes and a no. God affirms he will reveal something.
But there's a limit.
Hard limit. God says, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. The full, unmediated sight of God is too much for human beings.
So what does God agree to show him?
He says he will cause all his goodness to pass before Moses, and he'll proclaim his name Yahweh, the Lord emphasizing his character, specifically his mercy and compassion. So the revelation isn't of form, but of character, of goodness.
Goodness in name, but not face. How does that work physically?
God gives specific instructions. Moses has to stand on a particular rock. As God's glory passes by, God himself will put Moses in a cleft, like a crack or cave, in that rock.
Hide him away.
And cover him with his hand until the main part of the glory has passed. It's protective.
Amen.
Then God says, I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen.
See his back. What does that even mean?
Symbolically. It likely reinforces that mediated partial experience. Seeing the back might mean seeing the results, the after effects of God's passing, his actions, maybe the glimpse of his reality, but never the full direct confrontation represented by the face. The face implies full presence, relationship, the core being which remains veiled, too overwhelming, too holy for a direct human gaze. It preserves both intimacy and God's utter transcendence.
Okay, let's just quickly recap this whole intense negotiation we've walked through.
Right. It started with God saying, go to the land, but I'm not coming with you personally because you're stiff-necked. You get an angel instead.
Which led to the people's intense grief, the stripping off of ornaments as a sign of that mourning, realizing what they might lose.
Then we saw Moses step up, using that special tent of meeting outside the camp, having this unique face-to-face as a friend access to God.
And he uses that access to intercede First asking for clarity, then powerfully reminding God of their special relationship. You know me by name, I've found favor, and connecting that to God's responsibility for the nation.
Which build up to that absolute demand. If your presence doesn't go with us, we're not going. He pinned everything on God's presence being their only real distinction from every other nation on earth.
And amazingly, God agrees. He says he will go with the whole nation, explicitly linking it back to his favor towards Moses personally.
And then comes Moses' final bold request, show me your glory, leading to God's complex yes but, revealing his goodness, his name, his character, allowing a glimpse of his back but protecting Moses from the fatal sight of his face.
So when you pull back and look at this whole chapter, God's initial withdrawal, the people's reaction, Moses' intense negotiation focusing purely on presence as the marker of identity, and that final partial revelation of glory.
Hmm.
What does it really tell us about relationship, about what it means to be God's people?
It really makes you wrestle with Moses' core argument, doesn't it? What truly makes a people distinct? Is it their land, their history, their laws? Or, as Moses argues here, is it something far more dynamic, more fragile, perhaps? Is it about the active experience accompanying presence of the divine?
So identity isn't fixed, it's relational.
This chapter strongly suggests that, especially for spiritual identity. It might be less about what you possess or where you are, and more about who is actively with you. It leaves you with a pretty big question, I think. What does it mean, really, to be set apart? And just how fundamental is that sense of presence to that calling, maybe even for us today? It challenges the easy answers about what makes a community or an individual truly distinct.